Hello students, welcome back. As we are discussing in the last lecture that when you create a derived class object, what is the order of constructor calling base class then derived class. Now we're going to see the implementation of this example that we've discussed in the last lecture. So what you're going to do, going to have two class, very simple two classes. Base class have one data member and one member function, both are as public. Similarly, derived class will also have its own public data member and member function. So we're going to use public inheritance to inherit the properties of base class to the derived class. So do one thing, just open that shared folder that I have already uploaded in the Google Drive and download the source file from that source code folder, order underscore public underscore inheritance1.cpv. Okay, so here is the source code that I have already uploaded. So download the first file and open your dev C++, and then we're going to understand the order of creation of the object. So what we did, we have created a very base class here, to save a time during the video lecture. I already opened that file, so I am not going to write any code. The code already provided. So I'm simply going to use them. Okay. So I have created a base class here and declare a data member ID as public to that class. And it has one argument constructor with the default value, and I am using initializer list here to initialize the data member of the base class. Okay, so thereafter what I did, I created another class here, derived class, called class derived, and inheriting that class from base class as public inheritance. So as we have already discussed in the last lecture, public inheritance means the public data member and member function of the base class will remain public in the derived class. Okay, so we can access all the public data member using derived class object or from derived class member functions. So we try to keep the derived class very short and simple. We have only one data member here as m underscore cost as double, and we have one argument parameter as constructor with default value, and we are also using initializer list to initialize the derived class data member. Okay, so let's now create the object one by one, then we'll able to understand how object of the derived class gets created. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I simply put this line in comment. So here we first created a base class object. So what is going to do, base class constructor gets called while you're creating the base class object. So it's going to call this constructor, and the data member of the base class will be initialized by the default value as 0. After doing this, it's going to print this line, this text to your console as base, because base class is here standalone class, it's not inheriting from any other class. So it's simply going to call the constructor of its own class. If we compile this code, so as we expecting, it's first print this line instantiating base from the main method, and then when we create the base class object, it called the base class constructor and it's print this simple output base in the console. Okay, now let's do one more thing. Now remove the comment that we have put in the main method. Now what we're going to do, we're going to create first base class object and then we're going to create derived class object. Now let's see the order of the constructor calling here. So see the output, and let's try to examine how we get this output, how this constructor get called here one by one. So in the main method, line number 30, we have created the base class object. So it get called the base class constructor. So it's print the word line base. In the very next line, that means in source line number 33, we are creating a derived class object, and we know this derived class object is a child class of base class. Child class of base class. So base class is the parent class. So what we're going to do here, parent class object will be created first, means parent class constructor will be called first. So if we look at the output, see it's creating the base class object as part of the derived class object. So it called the base class constructor again, and then once parent class object is created, so it's going to call the derived class constructor, and finally derived class object gets created. So what will be the order? If we summarize the content here, the order will be like this. First, few points you need to remember. First, parent class constructor will be created, will be called to create the base part of the derived class object. In the second step, when after the creation of base class part, derived class constructor gets called. So we should remember this order while you creating a derived class object. Okay, first the topmost base class constructor get called, and then it's followed by the derived class constructor get called. So this is the simple example that we try to discuss in the last lecture. So this is all about this simple example that we created. So this is the thing we have written here. First, the most base class will be constructed first, then child class will be constructed following the order of this. Okay, so let's see the next complex example here. So I'll suggest you go to the same folder and download the second file from that folder. So what are you going to do in this example? First, we'll have a base class A, B will be derived from A, then B will be work as a base class of C, and C will be the derived class to B, and then C will be the base class to D, and D is the last derived class. It is not going to further derive any other classes. Now let's try to understand here. First try to understand this graph here that I plotted. That how many base classes we have? A is the base class of B, then B is the base class of C, then C is the base class of D. And out of these four, which class is the topmost base class? Out of these four classes, look at this hierarchy here. The topmost base class will be class A. So when you create the object of class D, topmost base class constructor will be called first. So S constructor will be called first. Then the class inherited from A, B, and B is the base class of C, and then B's constructor will be get called. Similarly, next C's constructor get called, and at last the bottommost class, we called it the lower level derived class, it's going to be called here. So let's open the dev C++ and try to implement the code and try to understand the order of execution. So open the second file. So we have created first a very topmost basic base class here, class A, have only one constructor. Similarly, class B, we are performing public inheritance. So now A is a part of B. Then we are inheriting C from B. So now we can say A and B both are the part of C. And then we are inheriting D from class C. So we can say A, B, C, these three classes are the part of object of class D. Okay. So let's check the main method. Here we have created first a base class, topmost base class object, which is not inherited from any other class. It is a single class, simple class only. So when we create this object of topmost base class, it only going to call the constructor of this class only. Okay. So let's implement and then we'll try to understand how this flow is working here, flow of constructor calling. Now look at this. When you create the first object of topmost base class A, it only call the constructor of its class only. Okay, self constructor gets called because it is not inherited from any other class. Then when you create another object of class B which is inherited from class A, so here we can make one comment, add one comment, B is child of A. Okay, B is child of A. So definitely S constructor will be called first, then B's constructor get called. So if we check the output here, so while you're creating B's object, S constructor get called first, then B's constructor get called. Next, when you're creating the object of class C, here we can write C is direct child of class B. So while you're creating the object of class C, then if we look at the hierarchy here, first A is the topmost base class, and then A is derived to B, and thereafter B is derived to C. So what will be the order of constructor calling? Topmost constructor called first, AS constructor, then followed by B, then it is followed to C. So if we look at the output window here, first S call, then B is call, then C is call. Similarly, when you're creating an object of class D, then what will be the order? You can make a comment. A derived to B, B derived to C, and C derived to D. So the order will be S constructor, then followed by B's constructor, then followed by C's constructor, then it is followed to the bottom level class D's constructor. It is the last class in our source file. So as we discussed, it created S constructor, then B's, then C's, then D's. So I hope this discussion will give you the idea, to get the clear idea how constructor gets called when you perform single inheritance or when you perform multi-level inheritance. Thank you.